The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of KSMQ Public Service Media Incorporated or its assigns.
Right now on Farm Connections, we travel back in time with the help of the Mower County Historical Society. We visit with people that impacted history and made a difference in agriculture, places that are significant and how we mapped them and charted them, and then the things that were involved to make agriculture productive. All right now on Farm Connections.
Welcome to Farm Connections with your host, Dan Hoffman.
Farm Connections on KSMQ, sponsored in part by the Cedars of Austin, a senior living community. We even have a retired farmers club. Independent, assisted, and memory care apartments. Learn more at cedarsofaustin.com. Will Mahler, the ag attorney, has been representing dairy farms in Minnesota, Iowa, and Wisconsin for 37 years. Will Mahler, the ag attorney's office is in Rochester, and Will is a proud partner of Farm Connections. Thanks, Will Mahler.
To understand the history in our past leads us to where we're at. If we build on the past and strive towards a better future, we will get there. The Mower County Historical Society collects, preserves, and displays the many things that have contributed to the community and to the economic fabric of our area. I had the pleasure of meeting with the Executive Director of the Mower County Historical Society, Dustin Heckman. Dustin showed me maps of days gone by and demonstrated how the changes in those maps parallel the many changes that have happened to our farmland and to our agriculture in Minnesota.
Thanks for coming today, Dan.
Well, this is great, and thanks for having us. What's important about maps? Why do we care?
Well, maps are kind of the first primary document that we have of how states became what they are or areas became what they were. So it's usually one of the first primary sources that people go to find out about their family history or just how the land developed itself.
Well, you've got some great timelines here. Can you help us walk through that?
Yeah, so with Minnesota specifically, we start out, kind of the story of it starts even before what the timeline starts with here. Back in the British colony days, we were part of what was known as the Northwest Territories when America gained its independence in the 1780s. And so there's only a sliver of Minnesota there. But then with the Louisiana Purchase in the early 1800s, most of Minnesota came into being as part of the United States.
Thank you. Dustin, where does this map fit into the timeline as we look at the timeline?
So this map is from 1849. So this is when Minnesota had Wisconsin become a state. So Minnesota was actually being part of its own area. Because originally when we started out, Wisconsin Territory actually went from present-day Wisconsin all the way through Minnesota out into the Dakotas here. Well, when Wisconsin became a state, they didn't want Minnesota part of that. So then Minnesota broke off and was its own state, or own territory, which included parts of the Dakotas. And when they did the mapping of Wisconsin, actually, the Upper Peninsula that we know as part of Michigan now was kind of left over and not claimed by anybody. So Michigan basically said, well, we'll just take it because there's so many natural resources there, we'll just keep it for ourselves.
And they used the St. Croix and the Mississippi to form our eastern border?
Correct. So yeah, you have the first kind of crude drawings of the Mississippi and the St. Croix. So that was the border there, and they used part of Lake Superior as well as determining the border between Michigan, the United States, and then what would be British America and Canada.
I love what you're telling us about the maps and what it means for us today. And I'm also hearing a theme of how important the waterways were at that time.
Right, and that, with early Mower County, a lot of the history, even with some of the ghost towns that aren't around anymore, it seemed like the first thing the settlers did, besides plat out the area, obviously, was put in mills right on the river. So we have all these mills popping up along the Cedar River. It's a water transport route. You can use the water power to grind, use the millstone and grind it around and turn the mill. So a lot of people are getting close to waterways as a transportation mode. This is before railroads are really coming through the area, just maybe beginning to. So waterways were the top transportation route along with stagecoach lines.
You got some great stories here. Let's move on and see what else you've got. We've got another map here that says 1856, and of course that picks up where we left off here. What's significant about this map?
Right, so what the Chapman map here represents is now you're seeing counties getting more organized, especially in southeast Minnesota. As the territory of Minnesota is growing, some of these counties are actually being formed, so now they're becoming more of organized and they have their commissioners in place. So like in Mower County, you start to see the 20 townships develop. And within those townships, now you have sections. So each section is 640 acres within the 20 townships, making up more smaller government units within Mower County.
And of course, each township is 6 miles square by 6 miles, right?
Right. So and that comes into the new land surveying technique where we're trying to square everything off rather than have, this tree over there by that rock over there by this river. So it's a lot more uniform so that people have a better understanding of what is their land and what is not their land.
Any differences in soils and water transportation during that time period that you noticed?
As far as, water transportation and soil, I don't know how much difference there really was. We're starting to get into, the really rich farmland now is really starting to back out into southwest and south central Minnesota. So you're starting to see more people move that way. So this is just kind of, you see a lot more industry developing along the river as, you would expect with the waterways there. And, people are just kind of moving away, maybe trying to start their own little metro area and hope that they grow to be what the state needs to have for industry and commerce.
And they're after opportunity, and they're after good, rich soils, prairies, something that can produce wheat probably at that time.
Yeah, so they're looking at different crops that they can produce, wheat, even in the Mower Freeborn, Dodge Steel area, you even see some potato planting going on. So there's all these different crops people are trying, seeing what's going to be best for the land. In Mower County, we have a mixture of just real rich black soil, good topsoil, but you also see some of the sandier soil around the Lansing area. So, people are just trying different things, seeing what's going to work, and then that turns into what farming techniques they have going forward.
And of course, those soils and the ability to own soil and raise crops led to some great industries in Austin that revolve around agriculture. We've got some great examples of feed moving into livestock, into finished products for consumers, haven't we?
Yes, Mower County is very much, we have Austin, which is a very large city within the county. It takes up probably 85% of the population of the county today. So agriculture has really been the backbone of what Mower County was and the development with that. So yeah, you have a lot of, townships that are strictly all farmland. So they're creating this crop that eventually moves into feed, the hogs in the Hormel plant, which eventually becomes the finished product of what we know today as Spam or, the different ham products that they produce. So, not only are we creating subsistence, food and crops to keep ourselves alive and keep the settlers going, but now we're starting to think of new industry to develop and how to feed that industry and grow our county to what it is today.
Another person I met with was Dale Tischer. Dale operated some of the construction and agricultural equipment we'll take a look at today. He has a very unique perspective on how this equipment and the men of that time changed the landscape and also agriculture in Mower County, much of it impacting us yet today. Dale, you used to work for Martin Boosted, correct?
Yes.
How many years?
Roughly 28.
28 years. Many years as an equipment operator, and equipment like the Cat 60 behind us, right?
Right.
What kind of work did you do with the equipment?
Just about every need you could think of. He had farmland. In the spring we'd pull plows and multiple discs. Well, I don't know, everything that needed to be done. Buried rock and you name it, we did it.
Well, earlier you talked about running over 40 acres to take out weeds for somebody.
Well, there was a couple of girls lived here in Austin. They had inherited the folks' farm, and it grew up to weeds, and nobody would plow them under. And so Martin says, well, I got a guy that can do that. We went out with a cat and plow and turned it under.
And that was Dale.
Well, yeah.
How many bottoms on that plow?
There was only 4, maybe 5. I don't remember which one I had.
And how tall were the weeds?
Well, they wouldn't see you walking in them.
So they're at least 6 feet tall.
Oh, at least.
And I'm thinking if we look back in history, much of Mower County was prairie and covered with prairie grasses that were probably 5 to 8 feet tall. Is that correct?
Well, from the movies I've been watching, yes.
Well, Martin and you and others like you helped transform that prairie into something a little more productive. It gave us farms, it gave us a livelihood, it gave a tax base. You know, the county, the state, and the townships tax those areas, and if they weren't productive, our whole way of life would be a lot different today, wouldn't it?
Well, yes. They wouldn't have all these air-conditioned tractors.
What are some of the memories of that road building and work you did with Martin?
Oh boy, where do you want to start?
Well, you said you worked there 28 years, and I also heard you say he was ahead of his time. In fact, you said about 30 years ahead of his time. What did you mean?
Well, he hooked multiple discs together, and he just done things that farmers are just starting to do now.
What would happen if you told Martin, your employer at that time, it can't be done?
Didn't do anything.
So Martin would reply back in quick order, can't do anything?
Didn't do anything.
Didn't do anything. So in other words, he was challenged to maybe push the window and accomplish things?
Oh, he knew how to do it. Fellas could be standing in water, mud knee deep. Things weren't going good, and Martin would pull up, and when he'd leave, well, you could walk on water.
Well, you mentioned earlier going down the tracks in front of the snowplow on the tree.
Oh, that one down there by, from Grafton to, well, Austin, I guess is where I started. The snowplow would jump over these ice drifts. The wind would blow the drifts, and it would rain, freeze, and it would drift. And the snowplows on the train would jump track, and then I went ahead and broke that up for them. They went 2 miles in 2 days, and we went 4 or 5 miles the next day, so an idea how much better it was.
So you kept the railroads moving even in deep snow?
The deep snow. Then when I come to the trestles, I'd go over them with the bulldozer, put one track on the rail and the other one on the wood, and drive across. But when I got to the Cedar River, I said, this is as far as I'm going.
I'm thinking that was a very smart idea. So you saw machines like this move snow and keep our train transportation system going, which was passengers and freight. What else did you do with these engines?
Grubbed out trees. Then when there's need for it on a farm, like in the spring or the wet fall, or sweet corn trucks, they couldn't get around, and he'd have bulldozers out pushing the trucks.
What made this machine more useful than, say, a rubber-tired machine?
There are many places you could go. You could hardly walk where these machines will go.
Well, tell me about the time you were digging a pond at Clarence Krull's farm and the snow came.
Oh, we had, well, Martin didn't want us working in the shop when we could be outside, and it was a good February. We were out there, we moved out to this Krull farm to dig a pond. And after several days, it snowed and the wind blew, and Martin says, well, we bring that machine in and do maintenance. We're not going to dig anymore. So we went out to get it, and Krull says, you're not going to take that home today, because all we could see sticking out was about that much of the exhaust. Well, fellow was with me, he got lined up for starting it, and I started the starting engine. And we revved her up, and I cleaned off the seat, and I drove it out. The farmer come out. I still wish I had a picture of the look on his face. He saw me driving away from that snowplow. He said it couldn't be done. I worked for Martin a long time. It can't be done.
Well, that pond is still in existence. It's Clayton Township, and it's still useful, so the design and the construction must have been done right. But you mentioned walking out of that snow. So something about this machine is different than other equipment. What makes this special?
Well, look at all the area on the ground from the front to the back. The width of these things. A rubber-tired machine, you'd probably have 2 or 3 of these for traction. These will float most anywhere.
So on a round rubber tire, we've got maybe 18 inches by 18 inches, depending on how wide the tire is, meeting the ground. Here we've got as long as the track is. Was there anything you couldn't do or pull with this machine?
There was one time on a snow job, we were over by Petrans. We were derailment, and cars laying all over, and they had an on-track, railroad had a crane to pick up the cars, and we would push the cars to them. Well, we had this one car was loaded and we couldn't move it. We had 4 bulldozers pushing and we could not. And all of a sudden I heard that familiar D7 on the other side, and you know, we moved that thing.
So Martin brought in reinforcements?
Oh, he was right there.
Did somebody tell him it can't be done and he decided it could?
No, they just knew.
You talked about some of the soils and the farms being so wet here that Martin had a special way to get fuel out to the farms.
Oh, this was it.
How'd he do it?
Well, you drive out across the wetlands. If you were to walk, you'd see water in your tracks. Go with one of these, but you couldn't with the rubber-tired tractors.
Well, you've done a really good job of telling us about how they were used. Good, genuine conversation. I also had the chance to visit with 2 of my favorite people that love agriculture and history and can tell it well. My dad, Laverne Hoffman, and my uncle, his twin brother, Vernon Hoffman. Laverne and Vernon were born on a farm near rural Minnesota. They farmed their entire career. They love agriculture and love to share the history and make others appreciate how we raise our food, fuel, feed, and fiber. Let's listen in as they talk about the machinery, some of it which they've donated to the Historical Society of Mower County. Farm Connections brought in 2 special guests today, my Uncle Vernon and my dad Laverne, to talk about making hay. Was it a good time?
Yes, you had a good time, all right.
Was it a lot of work?
It was kind of work.
Well, hand work, you used a fork.
And then when you did get it in the barn, it was hard to pull it apart to get it down to feed it.
And you're talking about...
They had a hay knife. You could cut the hay.
So you're talking about making hay before this baler. You're talking about loose hay where it was brought in?
That's loose hay, that's right.
That's true.
Well, how'd that happen? You cut it in the field and then what happened next?
Well, you have to let it dry. And then we had a dump rake. You know, you put the team on the rake and the long tongue and the teeth you'd raise up and down. You'd rake a row of hay.
So you'd bring it along the field, and when you get parallel to where the windrow was, you'd lift the tines up, and then go again and collect it and start over again. So once you got the hay in windrows, what happened next?
Well, we had the hay loader then, but later we had had a baler, and this rake would rake it up to the stationary baler, and we thought that's pretty good. Have bales is easier to feed, and have an elevator, bring it in the barn.
But you had to pitch every bit of it.
Well, you've got a very neat and interesting piece of equipment behind you. What is it, and tell us how it works.
Called a John Deere Dane stationary baler, 1914.
So it was used to do what?
To make bales of hay and straw. So, yeah.
Where'd the straw and hay go in?
Yeah, well, we'd go around the straw stack and bale, clean up around the straw and bale, so that the farmers had a bale of straw for the winter.
So you owned it, or your dad bought it, my grandpa, or?
Yeah, that's right. Probably in the 40s, 1940s we got it.
John Deere, 39 John Deere pulled it and run it.
A 39B?
Yeah.
39B.
There's a platform there. I stood on there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we got short of help, so I had to stand on the ground. and do all the pitching in there. Otherwise, somebody else had to put it up on the platform,
we put
and I
the
pushed it in.
we put the blocks in, and
We baled some straw for a guy, and he says, that guy standing there all day long is sure steady. And that was me. Wondering how he could do that, because you have to miss this plunger here.
yeah, you got to watch out for that.
Yeah.
Was there a skill to being steady and putting the hay in just right so the bales were better?
You had to watch what you're doing.
If you didn't put it in steady, would the quality of the bales?
No, that wouldn't
Well,
affect the bale.
there was a mark on the baler, so you knew how far to go, and then you'd have to stop a minute so you put the block in. But you have to watch your plunger when it's up there, so otherwise you'd break your block.
He did all that,
Yeah.
and then laid out in the field. You know, we had the rake bring it up to us, because this didn't go around.
With the old mules.
We had Grandpa's mules there. He had a farm sale in 1939. He would sell everything but not those mules. So Ma says, bring them over here. So we had them, but you know, they were a little tricky. You try to get the harness on while they'd squeeze you. And I'd say, get over.
Did those mules have names?
Huh?
Did your mules have names?
Jack and Jenny.
Yeah. They could really pull a load.
Did they ruin any fences?
Well, yeah, they like to chew on the wood.
And they lean on the fence too,
When we
like
had 'em in
all
the
horses.
Had them in the shed, they was kind of eating the shed up.
Eat the post, lean on
Eat
it,
the post, yeah. They were.
and break it off.
Yeah.
So did you ever tell Grandpa you didn't really appreciate those mules as much as he did?
Well, no, because we cultivated with them and we put them on the mower. They were real handy. And when we was in school yet, we'd come home from school. We'd have to hitch those mules on the spreader and go out in the cornfield and husk corn for the pigs. That was fun. They'd keep going away from the corn. You know, we said, "Come on back here."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
things are different now.
Any stories about those mules kind of laying down on the job ever?
Well, yeah, our brother, we were gone putting up hay or something, and we had our other brother cultivate. Well, you know, about noon, the mule laid down on him. And so he didn't know what to do about getting the mule back up, get going. He went up to Ma and says, the mule is sick. You know, a mule will never get sick because they know enough not to eat or drink too much water.
Either one.
Well, we had never no trouble like that.
Well, he walked up to her mother and said, "What should he do? Only thing to do is unhook the mule." And then it got up.
Yeah,
and
then it
no
took
more
off.
cultivating.
Mission accomplished. The mule conquered man. Well, how did this thing work? You pitched it in, Vernon, and the plunger came down. What happened
Yeah.
next?
When he got marked, then Vernon would stop putting the stuff in, and then I'd put the block in. But you'd have to watch this thing.
So you had, how many people operating this particular piece of machinery?
Well, it took three.
Yeah, one and put the
You were
wire
tying?
in. I tie it and put the block in. And you put the
Well, I put it in, but somebody else had to bring it up to me.
Yeah.
So it'd be four, wouldn't
yeah, so you don't run out of work.
And all the people in the field bringing it in, or was it a stationary
Just
pile
one around
usually?
this one.
Usually it's a stationary pile.
it? Yeah.
How long would it take to do a large stack?
It took all day, or no, next day too yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did the baling between morning chores and night chores, and then came back again and did it the next day?
Yeah, we come early as we could because, you know, around it's dry. And
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of pitching.
Yeah, it's coming. She wants to go backwards.
Oh boy. Get it?
Yeah. You should have put him on the other side, huh?
Yeah.
And now the block's up there. You put that, maybe you want to be in there, put it in there.
I'll turn it a little bit.
Yeah. We'll pretend we can put this block in there. It goes like that.
And that's it.
Then we put this up again.
Yep.
There.
Thanks for joining us on Farm Connections. It's always a treat to look back at history, especially agricultural history, and learn about days gone by. It helps center us, ground us, and think about how far we've come and the progress we've made. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you again next time on Farm Connections.